I sing along,
Welcome.
but then a thought creeps in my head, takes me out my element, listing problems A to Z, anxiety and
Your
fear shifts,
hellos
but then
and
a little
intros
voice
are welcome in the
inside
chat box
tells me I'm gonna be
as
alright.
we
I got
ease in
everything I
to our
need,
webinar today.
all I gotta do is sing. Gaze at a tree that I see a bee. He's buzzing around where the flowers abound. But then a thought creeps in my head, says that I'm inadequate, listing problems A to Z, all my insecurities. But then a little voice inside tells me I'm gonna be alright. I am everything I need, all I gotta do is sing. La la la,
Nice. Welcome, everybody. I'm Rebecca. I'm the communications person here at Round Sky Solutions. Thank you for joining us for our introductory session on sharing power in cooperative meetings. And I'm really excited to meet you all today and to see some of you. Some of you I've been seeing in our spaces, so nice to see you again. And share with all of you what we've learned about working with power dynamics in collaboration, especially. And recently, I've had quite a few conversations with people about their challenges, especially around transition within their teams. Many organizations have experienced some growth or some turnover on their team over the last couple of years, being a difficult time to say the least. And they're finding that in this time, it's been harder to share leadership and power within this transition of how do we get new people on our team and really taking ownership and initiative and sharing power with them. And so with that, many of you know us and I've been in conversation with you, but I want to share just two things about Round Sky to kind of just start the conversation so you know who we are. And the first is that Round Sky is a remotely operated worker-owned cooperative, meaning we're a business where the workers own it together. And we believe that there are two main training opportunities when thinking of sharing leadership and power. And I think combining these two is somewhat unique to us. First is the tools and processes that we teach under CoLab. But even if those tools were perfect, not saying that they are, that even exists, we still need number two, which is personal development to nurture self-awareness, groundedness, and emotional intelligence, which is super important in facilitation and especially tuning into the power flows. And that leads me to the second piece I want to share with you, which is we approach these two kind of tracks of development in all our courses with both the focus on the hard skills and the soft skills, which can be considered personal development in this case and somatic practices. And you'll hear us talk about our main strategic initiative today, which is the Cooperative Leadership Certification Program, CLCP for short. And we'll reference some of those tools that we teach in our training and the facilitation tools that we use in our meetings as a way to align with cooperative values. So if what we're offering today resonates with you and how you'd like to approach your facilitation, consider applying. Applications are due next Wednesday, October 5th. And everybody who applies gets invited to chat with me in an interview to see if it's the right fit. So even if you're just curious, you're welcome to apply. So with that, a lot of us are on Zoom these days, but I want to touch on some logistics. First off, this session's being recorded as was announced, and I'll share it with all of you probably sometime tomorrow. You'll get it in your inbox. And if you have any questions or comments, they're very welcome. Put them in the chat box. And people have been using that, so you know where it is. Unmute yourself if you are confused about where the chat box is, but you see a speaking bubble image. And then if you have any tech issues, you can chat me or Daniel directly. And for the most part, stay on mute so that we can, our mics are really good at getting background noise, as we all know by now. And lastly, we only have 1 hour today to go over the material, so you'll probably leave with questions, and I personally think that's good. I think it means you're grappling with something, and we'll get to what we can today, and there'll be more space and more time in the future as well. All right, all of that aside, I'm going to pass it to Daniel now to kind of get us grounded.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Welcome, everyone. My name's Daniel, and I thought we could just start even before going into more introductions, just with arriving. We have been doing a lot with understanding our own kind of like somatic awareness and bringing that to our teaching a bit so that we can, arrive fully into whatever spaces we're trying to, be cooperative within. And so I feel like that's a really important aspect of sharing power, is kind of like understanding our own grounded place from which to express and communicate ourselves. So let's try that for a moment. I'm going to offer a couple of just suggestions for a kind of what we call like a somatic arrival, and but feel free to do whatever helps you, just to be present, be grounded, whatever that is for you. Either listen to my suggestions or ignore them and do what helps you just be present for a couple of minutes here. Yeah, so an invitation to, soften your gaze and just kind of, go drift inwards a bit. You might close your eyes or not, as works for you. And I often like to feel where my body meets the surfaces that are holding me up. So if I'm standing or sitting, I'm, right now currently like shifting my attention to my feet and feeling that sense of compression and the sense of weight of my legs down through my feet into the floor. Yeah, there's something, quite literally grounding about paying attention to my feet that I like quite a bit. I'm using that a lot lately as a way to just settle in to myself and to wherever I am. You might notice as you pay attention to your feet that something shifts in your body, just kind of like paying attention and being aware. And and as you become aware, you might notice like your breath shifts a little bit. Like I noticed as I was paying attention to my feet that I took kind of a spontaneous, deeper breath. Thanks for that. Yeah. So again, just kind of coming back to where I'm touching the surfaces, to my breath. With the breath, there might be some noise, a sigh, a little sigh or hum. Yeah, whatever else helps you feel grounded and arrived here and present. I like to come back to the space around me too, like if you had your eyes closed, you could probably slowly open them or just kind of raise your gaze and look around the space that you're in, like notice what's here in this space with you, and then shifting from there back to the computer or device, so whatever you're on, right? Like we're all here together as well through this odd mechanism of being online. We're having some technical difficulties as well, apparently. So all the more reason to like find like our center and our ground, to just like be present to both the the stillness and the distraction both, in a sense. Whether it's intentional or whether it's something strange coming in, like we can be present to that and open ourselves to arrive here. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Rebecca.
Great, thanks, Daniel. Nice to create some slowness, some slow down there. And as we approach this topic of sharing power, any somatic practice, any kind of tuning in can be really helpful for us to show up together and simply notice what's happening. So I want to offer that to you today. You already have those tools. And I also want to note that this is part of our course, that somatics is part of our course. So if that's something that's interesting to you, I would call that a green flag. And so with that, I'll keep us moving, and would love to hear a little bit from you all about who's in the room. So we're gonna do chat box. There's so much that can happen, like so much flowing, it can be hard to keep connection with it. So we want to make space for people to build some really deeper connections in the breakout rooms. So we're going to put you in some breakouts, and the offer is to start thinking about what's happening, what brought you here today. So share your name, your pronouns, location, organization you're connected with, if any of that is relevant, and what brought you here today. And if you have something additional, share a power dynamic or an issue or something that's coming up that you're experiencing that you'd like to address or at least explore today, which may be the same thing as what brought you here. So both of those are an invitation. And before you do that, Daniel and I will model this just so you have a sense of what to expect. So I'm Rebecca, she, hers, and I live in Bulbancha, which is also originally known as New Orleans, which is the land of many people, including the Chitimacha people. And today I'm here to share these tools that I've learned through Round Sky that offer some helpful frameworks for holding space for our team and learning as we go. So basically a practice of not expecting perfection. So that's something that I'm thinking about. And Daniel, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks. Yeah, Daniel, he, him pronouns. I live in Vermont, the unceded territory of the Abenaki people, and I'm one of the facilitators and coaches and founders here at Round Sky Solutions Cooperative. And one of the things about working groups that I'm really aware of is whether or not people feel included. That's really like a sensitivity that I have, is like, are people feeling included? And so today I'm excited to play with the link between sharing power and practices for including people in building up our agenda and including people in figuring out what we focus on as a team. And this power dynamic that I've been aware of lately is the way that urgency makes it hard to slow down, and can limit that sense of ability to participate and ability to be included. It's like if there's too much urgency.
Thanks. I think we're on the same on the same wavelength there, Daniel. All right, you have 5 minutes. The questions are in the chat box. I'll put them in there, or Daniel will. And I'm creating your breakout room now. All right, see you in 5.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Hello.
Glad that was enough time to see you're back. That's good. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Let people trickle back in. And as people do, some people are still in their conversations, but we'll start ours here. and people will come to this space as they will. But I'd love to hear what came out of that for you. Any themes or things that you're noticing that you'd like to share with the larger group? You can just unmute. If you prefer chat box, that's also welcome. But a few people are going to offer some themes or things they're noticing.
I'll hop on real quick.
Great.
I was chatting with Coley, and it was interesting that we're coming at this from completely different kind of sides of the spectrum. I'm coming from an organization that is fairly hierarchical, has been structured hierarchical for a while. And we're trying to kind of untangle that and figure out what it would look like to move towards a more cooperative, collaborative structure, whereas she was coming from an already established cooperative, and they're trying to kind of move towards some other structures and ideas of being together. And so just like seeing that we're kind of meeting in the middle or coming from opposite ends of the spectrum was interesting.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to be said about both like types of people and groups that are looking for structure, and we're all on a spectrum of collaboration or hierarchy in some ways. Yeah, I can definitely see that. For folks who trickled in, where people are sharing themes or things that they notice in their check-in, and hear from a couple people. If anybody else wants to unmute, or you can share in the chat box, that's also welcome. If raising your hand feels more comfortable, that's also welcome. There's like a reaction area that you can offer that. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone jump up. I'm offering the facilitation silence. So we'll keep moving, but your reflections are welcome in the chat box also, if that feels comfortable. Just themes, things that came up for you. And really, sharing power is such a big topic. There are so many possibilities of what all of you are even thinking about when I mentioned that, about what sharing power looks like, and the word power. Maybe we're all coming with different ideas. And I'm really excited about the possibilities of where we can go with this work together, like what power looks like when we share it, and the energy that can come out of it when we're like really moving forward. That kind of the flow state that we can get in collaboration is really exciting to me. And I also know that power dynamics will need attention in our teams, like that things will get out of balance, and that sharing power is definitely a practice. It's dynamic. It's not something that like we reach and then it's all set. It's like, okay, we're done. We shared power. We're now sharing power. It's definitely dynamic. And part of that is because we're all immersed in this culture of some super deeply harmful patterns, largely due to exploitative capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, all the isms, and that are really based on hoarding leadership and hoarding power and exploitation. And I name this because it certainly influences how we share power and leadership in our teams, and that shows up even in the most flat or most cooperative run teams. These pieces show up in the work, and we have a lot to unlearn, and how these things bubble up in different ways. And I've felt and heard from people that it can feel super isolating and disappointing to be doing solidarity economy work, or be in a cooperative and have these dynamics show up, and the people building this new economy or the solidarity economy are struggling with this also. So you're not alone. Of course it happens. And to me, the more important piece, or just as important piece, is how do we realign with, and we do that through some tools and processes to support us. But how do we use processes to help us get back to our values and get back to the ways that we want to share power when we get out of balance? And there's lots of ways to approach power, of course. And today we're going to offer you one look at how to share power and how to analyze it. And I encourage you to combine this or like layer it with the ways that you're thinking of power and what you already know. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about kind of the bigger picture before we zoom in to this tool that we use called the Power Matrix that helps kind of map out the power dynamics in cooperation, which Daniel's going to jump into a lot next. But also that's not the only thing to think about when we think about facilitation and sharing power. We also want to name that who has power to make which decisions is a really important part of identifying power dynamics. And we believe that giving people autonomy over their work is super important. And we do that through roles and being able to shift that as time goes on and as we understand different realities for our team. And then we also pay attention to collective decision-making processes for sharing power collectively, which decisions should be made collectively. So those are some things that we like to pay attention to that we're not going to get to today, but are definitely worth mentioning. So with that, I'll pass it to Daniel to share about the Power Matrix.
Cool. Thanks, Rebecca. Yes, so here at Round Sky, we've developed this tool called the Power Matrix. It gives a framework for understanding and analyzing power dynamics. Our co-founder, Cecile Green, developed this Power Matrix to explain, to kind of take a look at like, what are some of the big picture themes about how power, social power in a sense, and within organizations works and flows. And one of the key elements of working in a healthy way, well, actually, I want to say, maybe we didn't say this up. I don't know where I'm going to say this, but so like, we see power as neutral in a sense, right? Like power is just a force we're moving through the world with, and that it can be healthy or unhealthy or generative or destructive, but power itself isn't bad. And so we're looking at these 4 different kind of ways of unpacking some elements of power. And one of the key elements of working in a healthy way with power is this dialogue between the needs of the individual and the needs of the collective. And over time and across cultures, we've come up with lots of different ideas for how we should balance these out. Like sometimes, cultures want the way more authoritarian, individual power, and sometimes people want more collective power. And it's a dialogue. And in the Power Matrix, we show this as a spectrum along a vertical line from autonomous power up here at the top and collective power down at the bottom. And when I say autonomous power, I'm thinking that it's the power of any given individual in a group or a role within an organization, that, what power they have to influence the matters of their work and their life. For example, a nonprofit director who has the clear authority to define the priorities for their department, perhaps, yeah? Or a designated facilitator who has the power to guide a group through a process of decision-making. Those are forms of autonomous power that they have this kind of, they have this authority that they can exercise. And collective power is the power of a group or a community that they have over their life and work together. So for example, a cooperative's membership, has power to vote on a proposal and decide democratically whether to pass it or not. Yeah? Or a worker's self-directed team has to decide the best way to fulfill on the work that they're responsible for. And so these are forms of collective power. And what makes this a matrix is we have a distinction going kind of the other direction, which is the distinction that's creating, creating healthy powers to investigate the expression of power on a spectrum from implicit to explicit, right? So explicit being the clear, the spoken, the written, the otherwise really firmly agreed upon or sanctioned forms of power, right? That could be the authority given to the role in an organization of like a financial lead to make certain financial decisions that they have, that's explicit, it's given to them in their role. On the other side, we've got implicit power, and these are often the kind of the hidden or the unspoken or the assumed forms of power. Say the ability of a strong or persuasive personality to have more influence on the decisions that they're a part of. Sometimes founders or longstanding members have implicit power as they hold the history of the organization and people looking to them for direction. Race, gender, education, age, and all these and more can show up as implicit forms of power in our teams as well, depending on how intentionally we're working with aspects of identity.
Yeah, and thanks, Daniel. I just want to reiterate that we are using power as neutral. So none of these powers are inherently bad. They just are, and it really depends on how we're using these in real life situations. And we're not thinking autonomous versus collective, but it's much more of a spectrum of what's the right balance for us for now. We really want to give people power over their work, but we also need good boundaries. And it's not that collective power is always good. It can, collective power, people can use their collective power to stagnate from moving the work forward or stop something from happening, which can be good or harmful for the group, depending on the situation. And we see this in horizontal organizations. Sometimes their growing pain is that they're making all their decisions collectively. And so it slows them down in a way that's not helpful. And that having a better balance between autonomous and really trusting people to have power over their work. And then the collective, having a good balance can be a useful conversation, but what does that look like for your team? So again, this is spectrum, and we're looking for balance, and we're looking for the ability to learn from our experiences and to change the dynamic so that it will work better for us, knowing that at one point what worked may not work for us in another point, like being able to change those flows. So we wanted to get into a specific example first to show you how you might analyze the power dynamics in your team. And then you're going to do this in breakout rooms so that you can kind of watch us with an eye to thinking about what your conversation will be in your breakout. And we'll try to be brief here. So Daniel, what's the power dynamic you'd like to address today?
Okay. I'd like to imagine a founder's syndrome kind of thing, right? So let's say our small worker cooperative has been around for a while, but it's been a small team, but we're growing. And one of the co-founders, Max is wondering how to help the organization take on more shared leadership and step out of some of the leadership that he's had. A lot of responsibility has been on Max's shoulders, and the team was small enough to just figure things out on the fly, right? But we've gotten too big for that to work. And the new people are excited to be there. They have ideas to contribute, but there's still so much decision-making is either running through Max or getting bogged down in group discussions that are now like too big to be very effective. So the new folks are getting impatient because they don't know how to contribute fully, and Max is getting burned out. It's a mess.
Yeah, I can see that dynamic continuing to swirl. So I'm curious what you see about this dynamic in terms of explicit and implicit power. What's kind of showing up for you?
Yeah. So looking at the power matrix, we could say Max has a lot of implicit power, right? From his seniority in the organization. And as a small worker co-op, there's a lot of implicit power in the way we used to be able to just talk things through all together and kind of go with the flow as a small team.
Right.
Meanwhile, our explicit power as a small group has gotten, I lost my train of thought there. Okay. Explicit power as a small co-op has always been to do things collaboratively, right? So we have this explicit value, but how to do that's gotten less and less clear as the team has grown.
Yeah, I can see that. And what about what's happening with autonomous and collective power in this situation, do you think?
Yeah. We could say that Max has a lot of autonomous power as one of the founders, and that the organization as a whole has the collective power to actually make the changes of how we operate, but it's not very clear right now the best way to make those changes.
Yeah, and in general, just like a teaching moment when we're using the power matrix to help us understand a situation and what do we want to do about it. We like to map out some of those dynamics first, and then ask some questions about what could shift, what could be moved from implicit to explicit, maybe. What's the balance between autonomous and collective power? What's working for us? What could work better? So with that, what do you think would make this dynamic more generative for the team? And how can you use a power matrix to understand what to shift?
Yeah. I imagine that naming the way that Max's history with the organization is influencing this might be helpful, just making that implicit element explicit, right? But mainly it sounds like the team needs to get more explicit about the processes they're using to make decisions, which could help redistribute Max's power, his implicit autonomous power, and shift that to other people, into other teams and stuff like that. And then if we have this clear decision-making process, it would be easier to define who has the power to do what. And we'd like to do that through roles. And roles are a form of explicit autonomous power where we're giving, specific roles, specific, areas of responsibility, et cetera. So yeah, those are some of the ways things could shift to be more clear and hopefully more workable.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. We've definitely thought about this for a long time. So of course we've had some time to think about this, but hopefully this is landing for folks, and I'm really curious about what will come out. So now that we've introduced this framework and we've worked through this example, we're going to take some time to go back in pairs and again, introduce yourself and a scenario around power, and think about and share what dynamics are at play. Where does it lie on the power matrix in your sense? And how can you, if you were to shift it, where would you shift it? What would that look like on the power matrix? Does something implicit want to be more explicit, something more autonomous or more collective? What's the balance that you are seeing to try out next? And you have about 8 minutes to share, so 4 minutes each. So that's the time frame. So I'm gonna, if you have questions, shout them out. I'm gonna set up your breakout rooms. Yeah, unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Some of you might be in a group of 3, so just divide your time just a little less.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make it so everybody's in a group of 2, but people get shy when breakout rooms happen. Okay, opening all the rooms, and we'll see you back in about 8 minutes. Okay, I think we'll let people trickle in from their breakouts, but welcome back. Glad to see you. Start thinking about what you might want to share with the big group, the larger group. Welcome back. Nice. All right, I'd love to hear from some folks about what came up for you. Anything's open, questions that are coming up, themes, things you noticed, curiosities, everything's kind of fair game. But I'd love to hear from a couple of people if you're willing. You can raise your hands, you can unmute yourself, you can put it in the chat box. You can kind of wave your hands in the video and I'll look for you. Lots of options. You can ask me to unrecord or stop the recording while you share, if that feels better. Oh yeah, Shauna.
Yes, I will share. I wasn't quite sure going into it what we were looking at, but I appreciate my partner Katie for kind of helping me work through the thoughts. And I just shared a story around us. I work for a nonprofit in Wilmington, Delaware called Pacham and Terrace, and we shifted recently within the past year from a director hierarchical structure to a democratic cooperative workplace. And so now it's a group of 4 co-directors. And we thought we could just bring someone into that like an additional, a fifth person to help us with some restorative justice work that we wanted to do. And she was a guru. She's very well known in the community, and does great work, but we ran into some obstacles that we didn't see coming. And we see this collaborative, collective decision-making as like a wonderful thing. But when she came into it, she was used to doing things herself. So she became quickly frustrated with having to, oh, hold on, let's have a meeting about this and collectively make this decision. And so she became frustrated with that. She felt like we didn't trust her because to make decisions on her own. And we, no matter how much we tried to explain to her that, no, of course not, that's not we like to make decisions together and do everything together. And we thought it was all happy-go-lucky because that's how we operated. But I think we were not explicit enough with her in the beginning on how and why we operate, because we're still kind of fumbling in the dark with this transition as well. We know how we operate, but we don't necessarily know how to explain it to someone else. So I think we definitely could have been more clear in that, and also allowing her some autonomy and realizing, and I'm just realizing as I'm talking through this with Katie, that yeah, we should have given her some autonomy to make decisions on her own, because yes, she, does have expertise in this area. She does know how to move and navigate in this area, but we were kind of just stuck on, we're moving to this collectivism. So.
Right.
That's kind of the story. And it didn't end up working out, but it was nice to talk through it and kind of understand for the first time why it went down the way it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw lots of nods also, just so want to name that you're so not alone in that, and your organization is not. And there, like you mentioned, trust is what I heard. That's a big thing, trust around autonomy. But I also think there's trust around like the collective. Like, will some groups have the challenge of like trusting the collective to hold them through a process, like, and trusting that you'll get somewhere if you're in this meeting forever. But also people trusting you to have power over your work is important also. And how does that fit in? Daniel, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you want to jump in?
No, it just was a great example of like that implicit and explicit, like differentials, right? And like so many different things, whether it's like just a different personality, like the way, way of doing things, or whether it's like kind of the work history that you come from. Like there's just so many different reasons why. So having an opportunity to get clear and to talk that through and make things more explicit, and then, more understandable if they're not working. That's one of the things about implicit. Like sometimes it seems like implicit's bad, but it's not bad if it's working. But when it's not, when it breaks down, then we got to like bring it out in the open and talk about it.
Right. Like not sure how things are done. Like sometimes when you're 4 people or when you're with a group of people for so long, it just works for you. But then bringing on that 5th person then you need to be explicit about how things are done, like how a decision is made, how people can jump in for power without taking away from someone else necessarily, how to like really share it. Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for the feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, and we wanted to just take 1 or 2 minutes to share about this, introduce a way that we share power within meetings, since that was part of this also was our goal, knowing that you're going to leave with questions. But tension-driven meetings are definitely one of my favorite things. And the more and more that I work in them, I've been around Sky for 6 years, but like newly, this is my favorite thing about our tools that we've been doing forever. But Daniel, do you want to just share a quick intro to that, and we'll continue from there?
Yeah, right, because I want to connect, because you have this power matrix and how you're noticing like, oh, something needs to shift. Like, how do we do that, in a sense? And so one of the ways that, in this collab model, this idea of like really having a participant-led meeting means that each of us can, that each person on the team is welcome to bring forward whatever it is that they're sensing needs to be addressed, right? Whether that's like an opportunity to pursue some great thing, or whether that's a problem to solve something, that's going wrong. So, and we tie this back to like the somatics at the beginning, like, like an embodied sense of like, oh, I'm feeling something needs to shift, right? So even looking at the word tension, we're looking at that to, like that sense of like sensing a tension, or like the tension in the room, or the tension in myself. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there we go. So should I go through the archery metaphor stuff, Rebecca? Do we have time for that?
Yeah, let's take it. Let's do that, and then we'll get into Q&A.
Okay, great. Yeah, so like one metaphor that I like with tension is this idea of an archer or something like that, right? Someone's creative contribution is the arrow, and their tension is them pulling the bowstring back in a sense, right? And so if someone's has as an idea or something to discuss, something to contribute, they're like getting set to like, unleash their idea into the collective, and hit the target in a sense. And it's a really great way for people to move things from implicit to explicit, into the collective space to make decisions with. Concretely, we do this like by like having open like living agenda, where someone can like put their item down and own it. They become kind of the owner of that item throughout the decision-making process. They're the one kind of like tracking, like, oh, is this getting resolved? Is this moving forward in the way that feels good to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great tool for people to collectively build an agenda and have individuals name they need to happen in that meeting, because they really know like what needs to get clarity on, and the collective kind of supports them, is the tension supports them, and the tension being moved forward, or like getting resolution on something. And we'll share more about that in an upcoming email or in your Q&A. If you have questions in the chat, I'm seeing in the chat about the slides, they'll definitely be shared. But we want to make a little bit of time for the questions that have come up today for you around the power matrix, or anything is welcome. Tensions, I know we just talked about it for a few minutes, but I think it can, even that intro, you probably get a sense about what that is. So I'm going to move us forward and put your hand up or unmute your mic if you have a question. We'll stay a couple minutes later. Or put it in the chat box. Those are all your options. And let's see. So you'll get these like sneak peek slides. But here we are. There's our emails if you want them. With questions, comments, curiosities, it doesn't have to be like a formed question. It can just be a curiosity or a comment about what's landing for you, or what's maybe what's not, or where the gap is for you, what the tension is. Yeah. The floor is open. Yeah, Sandy.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the matrix and like some of the ways that you find it to be most useful. Like, is it like the more specific the problem you're trying to solve, the better a tool it is, or can you use it for more general issues, and like how do you kind of facilitate conversations around it? That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do think it's super useful for specific, especially when like for our example around founder syndrome, like that's such a big thing. And it's not that we want like the founder to go away, but we want whatever is happening that's challenging. Maybe they have to have their input on everything. For example, that's a common thing. Starting to narrow down where their power is and give people autonomy, like specifically where are they wanting to jump in with their input and say, actually, this is that person's role. And that's what we collectively agreed on. And you can give feedback, but you're not the decision maker kind of thing. So more specific is helpful, but maybe you have a different answer, Daniel. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking it kind of works on both levels in the sense that you can kind of map out kind of like a bigger picture dynamic of like, oh, this is generally what we see happening here is one view, which is mostly what we did in this little exploration here. But yeah, looking really more concretely, you could say like, when it comes to like a particular, like should this be like a policy that we all have to work on together or something like that? Or is this like something that's part of a role that we should give to like an actual individual to make decisions about, like, and there's the balance of collective versus autonomous, like in action. And it could be very specific around, some like key decision that has to be made every week or something like that. We could look like, where do we want the balance to be? Do we want this to be more in our group sphere or more given away to an individual role, for instance?
Yeah. Nice. So maybe the shift is, both specific, but also pattern level. Yeah, great question. Thanks for offering that. Other questions that people are having or curiosities?
And we are at the top of the hour, so if you need to jump, we totally understand that. But Rebecca and I will be here for another 5 minutes or so, at least, just to wrap up and answer any questions. And so, yeah, you're welcome to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely will share the slides. Yeah,
Oh.
John, share it, please.
Yeah, I'm interested in sort of voluntary associations and how people within them, thinking about the power matrix, they kind of seems like they have to own their autonomous power before they can create collective power. It's like if I'm volunteering, for a bake sale or something, and I say I'm going to bring 24 cookies, like I make a commitment which is explicit, and then I have to follow through on that commitment. And if I don't, then there are 24 cookies that don't show up at the bake sale or something. And so I'm thinking about the connection between people kind of owning their power individually, making an explicit commitment about it, and then following that through so that it can serve a collective, or it can serve a group end. And I'm curious whether in kind of professional paid settings, that's the same kind of thing that happens in voluntary associations, or if there are different phenomena that occur in those settings,
Mm,
That's so interesting. Can mind if I jump in, Rebecca?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that some of the dynamics are really similar. There is an element in volunteer organizations of an autonomous power implicitly collecting around the people who have the time and energy to contribute, right? Like, oh, like we need to do our budget. Oh, I know a little about finances, I'll do it, or something like that, right? And so, and all of a sudden they're basically, in a sense, implicitly taking on the role of like the financial, person for the organization, right? Like this happens a ton in volunteer organizations, like the authority by those who are willing to do the work, or something like that, right? And if it works, that implicit kind of like way of going about it is, if it works, okay, cool. In a more formal organization, that usually doesn't work for long, right? You might start that way. You might like have a group of people getting together to create a project, and each person, based on their skill sets and their interests, kind of like say, I'll do this and I'll do that, and it kind of starts like that. But after a while, it tends to need to get more explicit and more like, okay, this is actually your role. This is, this is the job description. This is the position we're hiring for, things like that, tend to create more kind of explicit structure, generally, right? But that balance of like the individual contribution and to the collective need, that's that dynamic that's still happening, right? There's still like, I'm turning in my marketing campaign for the benefit of the whole, right? If that's my paid role. And but then there's something that's totally unrelated to our webinar today, but like, how do we create collective accountability? Like, what if I don't turn in my marketing campaign, and how does the collective hold me accountable and and stuff like that? So it's a whole nother thing that we work with in terms of roles and accountability within the collective, but that's a whole nother webinar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. And thanks for that question also. It's been really great to share space with you all, and I'm glad that it's the chat box. Thank you for your affirmations. Glad it's been useful. That feels good. And we'll definitely, I'll share the slides with you all, share the recording, and some just follow-up material for your collaboration processes. So it was great to meet you all. Feel free to unmute yourself and say goodbye. But it was great to share space. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.